Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you thought Salem had already pushed the tension to its limit, Thursday, March 19th is the episode that may prove things are only getting more explosive. All week long, Days of Our Lives has been building pressure through secrets, suspicion, and emotional fallout. But now, that pressure looks ready to burst. Thursday feels like the turning point where lies become harder to hide, danger steps out of the shadows, and one split-second mistake could leave lasting consequences. If these spoilers play out the way they're building, this may be one of the most intense and game-changing episodes of the entire week. One of the most emotionally dangerous storylines on Thursday may be Paulina lying to Abe, because this is no longer just about keeping a secret safe. This is about choosing deception in the one relationship where trust matters most. And that is exactly what makes this so powerful. Paulina may believe she has good reason to lie. She may convince herself that she is protecting something fragile, preserving hope, or simply buying more time before the truth can do damage. If her secrecy is tied to Lexi's situation, then her fear may be understandable. She may honestly believe that saying too much too soon could destroy something that is not fully secure yet. But understandable does not mean harmless. Because with Abe, the issue is never just the secret itself. It is the betrayal that comes with being shut out. Abe is the kind of man who values honesty deeply, especially inside a marriage. He does not just want the truth when it is convenient. He expects it from the people closest to him. So if Paulina looks him in the eye and hides something major, the emotional consequences could be devastating once the truth finally comes out. That is why this scene could carry such quiet tension. Paulina may try to stay composed. She may answer carefully. She may work hard to sound natural, calm, even reassuring. But sometimes the more a person tries to sound convincing, the more suspicious they become. Abe may pick up on that. He may notice a pause that lasts too long, an explanation that sounds too polished, or a shift in Paulina's tone that makes him realize she is not telling him everything. And that kind of suspicion can be incredibly dangerous. Because once doubt enters a marriage, it starts growing fast. Abe may not know the whole truth yet, but he may know enough to feel that something is being hidden from him. He may start asking himself why Paulina is shutting him out, what she is afraid to say, and whether the secret matters more to her right now than their honesty with each other. That is what gives this storyline its emotional weight. Thursday may not be the day everything blows up between Paulina and Abe. But it could absolutely be the day the first real crack appears. A lie told in fear can still wound just as deeply as one told out of selfishness. And if Abe later learns that Paulina kept something this serious from him, this may be the conversation viewers look back on as the moment their trust truly started breaking. That is why Paulina's lie feels so dangerous. Not because it is dramatic on the surface, but because it may quietly damage the one bond she can least afford to weaken. Then there is EJ surprising Gwen, and this may be one of the most intriguing storylines in the episode because surprises from EJ are rarely simple. They usually mean strategy. That is why this scene immediately feels important. EJ is not the kind of man who casually drops unexpected news without a reason. If he is seeking Gwen out now, while pressure is building around him from every direction, then there is probably a purpose behind it. The timing alone makes the moment suspicious. He has Owen, Dr. Rolfe, and mounting questions hanging over him, so any move he makes at this stage is likely calculated. And that makes Gwen a very interesting choice. Maybe EJ brings her information she did not expect to hear. Maybe he offers something she was not prepared for. Or maybe he tells her a truth that sounds helpful on the surface, while secretly steering her toward a role in his larger plan. Whatever the surprise is, it works best if it leaves Gwen genuinely caught off guard, because Gwen is not easily rattled. If even she has to pause and rethink what she is hearing, then the audience will immediately know this conversation matters. That is where the real tension begins. Because Gwen is not likely to accept EJ's words at face value. She knows him too well for that. She knows that even when EJ sounds calm, sincere, or reasonable, there is often another motive underneath. So this scene may become less about the surprise itself and more about the game surrounding it. Gwen may start asking herself some very sharp questions. Why now? Why me? What does EJ want in return? Is he trying to warn me, recruit me, distract me, or use me? That is the kind of tension that could make this scene really compelling. Not a loud confrontation, but a controlled exchange where both characters are measuring each other carefully. EJ may be trying to keep the upper hand, while Gwen quietly works to figure out what he is not saying. And with those two characters, that kind of power play can be incredibly effective. That is why this may not just be a surprise. It may be a move. And if it is, then Thursday could mark the beginning of Gwen being pulled into a much larger story than she expected. EJ may think he is setting something in motion that helps him. But depending on how Gwen reacts, this conversation could just as easily create a brand new problem for him. That is what makes the scene so interesting. Because with EJ, even the calmest conversation can be the start of a much bigger explosion. Elsewhere, Leo and Dmitri defending themselves to Andrew may bring one of Thursday's most tense and layered scenes, because this is not just about answering questions. It is about trying to hold a shaky story together while the pressure starts tearing it apart. And that is what makes this confrontation so compelling. By the time they face Andrew, Leo and Dmitri may already be rattled. The weekly developments suggest danger has been closing in on them, which means they may walk into this conversation more vulnerable than they want to appear. That matters, because people can only keep up a polished front for so long before stress starts exposing cracks. Leo will probably respond the way Leo always does. He may talk fast, joke, dodge, and try to turn the mood lighter than it really is. Humor is often Leo's shield. It is how he avoids letting people see when he is truly nervous. Dmitri, on the other hand, may go in the opposite direction. He may try to stay calm, controlled, and emotionally restrained, hoping that careful answers will keep the situation from spinning further out of control. But the real question is whether they can stay united. Because once Andrew starts pressing them, the biggest danger may not be what he already knows. It may be what Leo and Dmitri accidentally reveal while trying to protect themselves. If one speaks too quickly, if the other hesitates, or if their versions of events do not line up perfectly, Andrew could immediately sense that they are scrambling. That is where the scene gets really interesting. This is not just about explaining their so-called fugitive fiasco. It is about whether they can survive the fallout without turning on each other. Pressure like this can expose every weak point in a partnership. One wrong answer can create suspicion. One defensive reaction can make them both look guiltier. One moment of disagreement can tell Andrew there is much more going on than either of them wants to admit. And Andrew is exactly the wrong person to underestimate. If he starts asking direct questions and senses that the story is falling apart, then Leo and Dmitri may lose control of the conversation very quickly. What they wanted to present as a manageable explanation could suddenly start sounding like a mess of contradictions, omissions, and desperation. That is why this storyline feels bigger than a simple confrontation. It is about survival under pressure. If Leo and Dmitri can hold it together, they may buy themselves more time. But if Andrew sees through them, then Thursday could become the day their entire strategy stops working. And once that happens, the chaotic situation they have been trying to outrun may finally catch up with them in full force. That is what makes this scene so tense. Not just the questions Andrew asks, but whether Leo and Dmitri can keep their story alive long enough to survive the answers. The most urgent storyline on Thursday may be Klouse finally confronting Liam, because this is the moment the threat stops lurking in the shadows and steps directly into the light. Up until now, Liam may have been living with a growing sense of unease. That feeling that something is wrong, that someone is watching, that danger is getting closer even if he cannot fully prove it yet. But a confrontation changes the entire tone of the story. There is a huge difference between suspecting you are in trouble and suddenly finding yourself face to face with the person bringing that trouble straight to you. And that is why this scene could be so effective. Once Klouse is standing in front of Liam, the fear becomes immediate. It becomes real in a way Liam can no longer dismiss, explain away, or push to the back of his mind. This is no longer a bad feeling or a suspicious moment. This is a direct collision. And if Klouse makes it clear that he has been tracking Liam for a while, closing in slowly and choosing his moment carefully, then the psychological pressure on Liam could hit all at once. That is where the scene gets truly intense. Because Liam may realize, in one terrible moment, that he is already much deeper in this than he ever understood. Whatever he thought was happening, whatever he thought he could still control, may suddenly look much worse. Klouse confronting him could make it obvious that this was never just intimidation from a distance. It was preparation, it was escalation, and now it is personal. You can almost imagine Klouse delivering his threat calmly, maybe even coldly, while Liam tries to hold himself together and not show how rattled he really is. That would make the scene even stronger. When a threat is delivered without shouting, it often feels more dangerous. It suggests control, it suggests confidence, and it suggests Klouse believes he already has the upper hand. That is what could make this confrontation so unsettling. And the danger does not stop with Liam. That is where the storyline gets bigger, because Liam is no longer emotionally isolated. Ari has entered his orbit. She has become someone who matters in this story, and that means Klouse targeting Liam automatically creates risk for her as well. Once someone dangerous starts circling a man who is forming new emotional bonds, everyone near him becomes vulnerable. That is why Thursday's confrontation may feel like the moment the week's emotional story and the week's violent story finally slam into each other. Liam is not just fighting for himself anymore. He may be fighting against the possibility that anyone close to him could get dragged into this nightmare too. And that is why this scene matters so much. It may not just be the point where Liam gets threatened. It may be the point where he realizes there is no safe distance left between his fear and the people starting to care about him. Thursday could be the day viewers stop asking whether Klouse is serious and start asking how much damage he is actually prepared to do. Because once the confrontation happens, this story is no longer building toward violence. It is already standing on the edge of it. Finally, we get to the storyline that may define the entire episode, JJ and Sean being pulled into a shootout. And this has all the ingredients to become the biggest turning point of the week. Because this is not just a burst of action thrown in for excitement. This is a crisis built on everything the week has already been setting up emotionally. That is what makes it so powerful. The spoilers strongly suggest that JJ's earlier bonding session with Theo may stir up painful memories tied to his past, and that emotional baggage could become devastatingly important once the pressure is on. In a normal situation, JJ may know exactly what his job requires. He may know how he is supposed to react. But a shootout is not normal pressure. It is the kind of moment where instinct takes over, and if guilt, trauma, or hesitation get there first, even a single second can change everything. That is where the danger really begins. Because if JJ freezes when Klouse has to be stopped, the cost of that hesitation may be immediate. He may not mean to hesitate. He may not even understand in that split second why his body is not moving the way it should. But if the memory of Theo, the weight of his past, and the fear of making another terrible mistake all crash into him at once, then JJ could lose the moment. And in a shootout, losing the moment can be catastrophic. That is where Sean may step in. And that is what makes this so heartbreaking. If Sean realizes JJ is not reacting fast enough, He may do what he has to do and move first. He may trade shots with Klouse because someone has to act, and there may be no time left to think. That kind of moment would hit hard because it would feel both shocking and tragically inevitable. Not a random twist, but the natural result of everything the story has been quietly building underneath the surface. JJ carries unresolved trauma. Sean steps up, and suddenly the consequences become physical. You can picture the scene unfolding fast, too fast for anyone to fix once it starts. A rush of movement, gunfire, confusion, then Sean down on the ground, bleeding, while JJ stares in panic at what just happened. That kind of image would instantly become the emotional center of the episode. Because once Sean is the one who gets hit, the shootout stops being just a dangerous incident. It becomes a moment of personal collapse. And that is where the fallout could be even more compelling than the gunfire itself. JJ may immediately blame himself. Not in some vague way, but in the brutal, crushing way that comes when a person knows they may have failed in the exact moment they were needed most. If he believes Sean got hurt because he could not act, then the psychological damage could hit just as hard as the physical injury. That is why this storyline is bigger than action. It is about whether JJ is still carrying wounds from the past that are serious enough to affect his judgment in the present. And once that question is raised, it cannot easily be put away again. Sean surviving would not erase that. In fact, it may make the aftermath even more painful. Because if Sean lives, then he may eventually demand answers. He may want to know exactly what happened in that moment. He may ask JJ the question nobody can avoid anymore. Did you hesitate because of Theo? Did the past stop you from doing your job when it mattered most? And if that conversation happens, it could turn Thursday's shootout into a much larger crisis about trust, fitness for duty, and whether JJ can still function under life or death pressure. That is what gives this story its real power. The shootout may be the explosion, but the emotional wreckage afterward could be even bigger. So Thursday's defining question may not just be whether Sean gets shot. It may be whether one split-second failure exposes a truth JJ has been trying not to face, that the past still has far more control over him than anyone realized. And in Salem, that is exactly the kind of revelation that can change everything. Thursday, March 19th looks like the days of our lives turns pressure into crisis. Paulina risks her marriage with another lie. EJ may be making a calculated move through Gwen. Leo and Dmitri are forced to defend a story that may be collapsing. Liam faces Klouse directly as the threat becomes undeniable. And JJ and Sean are thrown into the kind of shootout that could leave emotional fallout long after the bullets stop.